Ladies and gentlemen, it's my privilege today to request our Dean of the Medical School, Professor Willem Stern, to perform the official welcome to the audience here today. Professor Stern.
Thank you. It is really a pleasure to stand here and to welcome you at the opening of the Smart Center, of which you will, if you don't know it yet, soon discover what that is. I welcome in particular the management of the KwaZulu-Natal Central Hospital, as well as the people from UKZN and especially the members of the Department of Anaesthetics. Why am I so pleased that we are here? Well, a couple of years ago, very few years ago, the Department of Education started its so-called clinical training grants, giving those grants to the different medical schools and faculties of health sciences. And we needed to put our act together in the beginning on what to spend that, and we asked around, and one of the proposals we got was from the Department of Anaesthetics to start up this Smart Center. So I'm pleased to see that that has now happened, and welcome to this opening of this center, which will definitely add to the training of not only our undergraduate students, but in particular also postgraduate students, better known as registrars. And with that, I hand back to our Master of Ceremony.
Thank you very much, Professor Sturm. Next person to address the audience will be Professor Tahir Pillay. He's the Deputy Vice Chancellor and the Head of the College of Health Sciences. Professor Pillay, thank you very much.
Oh, thank you very much, and a very good afternoon to all of you, and thank you all for coming, and especially a warm welcome to the management of the Inkosi Albert Luthuli Hospital and other staff of the hospital. And I think we should have the Honourable MEC arriving soon. I'm here to represent the university, and obviously the university is in a partnership with Albert Luthuli Hospital, and in terms of its clinical training. Now, the university can justify many claims to excellence. It's one of the top-rated universities in South Africa at the moment, and in terms of its research output and various local and international ratings. And so we define our uniqueness as a disseminator and a generator of knowledge in a world where knowledge should know no boundaries.
Mrs. Zandi and Prof. Pillay will do the honors for us. Thank you very much. Welcome to the Smart Center. Please come. You might see that we've tried to set this up as a proper theatre. We've got a red line beyond which you shouldn't cross. But for today's purposes, we're going to not adopt a strict infection control policies. And we've tried to simulate it in such a way that it looks very much like a theatre. So we come through here. This is the old Stan version 1, which we acquired many years ago, which has been operational all the time, and we've used him in many demonstrations over the years. So we haven't quite put him out to pasture yet. He's still being used, and we still do a fair amount of training on that. It still can do a lot of the functions. Typically what we've set up here for today's purposes is a typical patient under anesthesia. So everything's hooked up as if the patient is having an anesthetic. Stan is there. If we just look here on this side as we're going through, this is a model that we've obtained to train people to do regional anesthesia. It's a very useful model. It's becoming more and more difficult for people to train on patients. So no patient's going to let a trainee doctor poke them 5 times before they get it right. So we're hoping we improve our success rate by getting our trainee doctors to practice regional anesthesia, epidurals and spinals, for example, patients having cesarean sections. So this model allows us to do that, and is very realistic a model to allow people to train in that regard. This is a trauma setup that we can use. We haven't quite set it up for today's purposes, but on one of the slides that I showed in my presentation, we can actually create a scenario where we can do various things with this model in terms of the trauma situation. And as I mentioned in my presentation there on my extreme left, you'll see a variety of airway equipment, pieces of equipment that we use to train our doctors in airway. So on that side there, we have all the airway equipment. If you look down here, we can practice airway on kiddies, on infants, on children, on adults, and with the tremendous development of technology for airway training, we can actually expose our trainees to that before they get going. The other good thing as well is that when the new piece of equipment comes on the market, instead of using it to train on a patient, we can train on this before we expose our patients to it. And then if we go around here, I'd like to introduce you to Stan. This is actually Stan. When people in the faculty, as I said, moaned that we spent 2.5 million on a dummy, it looks very much like a simple dummy, but it's a little more than that. You know, he makes his own urine, as you can see here. He makes urine, so it's programmed for him to make urine. In terms of what we have here, you can see this is a test that we often do to check how well paralyzed a patient is. These are twitches that we can look at. He also has the ability to open and close his eyes, which can allow us to decide whether he's asleep or not and see the effect of our drugs. So what I've asked our team to do for the purposes of this demonstration is to maybe just induce an anesthetic fairly quickly and give you a sense of what we're doing. So Stan's been hooked up already the way we'd monitor a patient in theatre. And you'll see on the monitor up there that we're monitoring a variety of parameters. We're looking at his blood pressure, his heart rate, his breathing, and his pulse oximetry, which tells us how well saturated his oxygen is, his blood is in terms of oxygen. So we will induce anesthesia in him, and as one of our team members is doing that, you'll see the effect of one of the drugs that he's using. It's a drug that Michael Jackson fans will be familiar with, Propofol. We strongly recommend that you don't try sedating yourself at home. Leave it to the experts, which we like to think we are. So that's basically how it happens. And if we scan onto the monitor, you'll notice that the whole computer algorithm setup tries to approximate the physiology of a patient. Now, one of the effects of the Propofol is that your blood pressure will fall, and you will notice the one in red that's falling, and the one in yellow, his breathing is ceasing. So it stops you from breathing, and it drops your blood pressure. And that's something we typically see. Obviously, we can use this in many scenarios. If you give too much, you're going to get an exaggerated response. If you don't give enough, you're not going to get enough of a response. And then if you pan his eyes, you'll probably notice that he's falling off to sleep, and his eyes will be closing as that happens. This is typically how we would induce anesthesia in our patients. If you just excuse, Dr. Modley will intubate the patient, meaning he'll place an endotracheal tube into the patient's airway, which will allow us to breathe for the patient. And he's done that very sleekly. And that essentially is how we would induce a patient. So you can see the possibilities in terms of how we could use this to train. It allows us to create a variety of scenarios. It allows us to make the intubation difficult, so you don't get the tube in. What do you do? It allows us to account for a variety of responses to the drugs that we give the patient, and how do you respond. We've created one scenario now that will follow up on this. Just while that is being developed, just to show you how this works, we have a sense that we we're injecting a drug. Really, this is a barcoded syringe with fluid in it that we inject through this port. This is a sensor that picks up the barcode and identifies the drug. And based on how much of the drug we give, you get a series of algorithms that kick into play, and then try to create a scenario depending on how the patient's physiology will respond. So essentially, it's very simple in terms of that. It's purely dependent on algorithms. The algorithms are quite complex. They've been drawn up with a variety of factors in mind. Now, if you notice the monitor, what's happened is after we've intubated this patient, his blood pressure is starting to fall and his breathing is becoming a bit erratic. The yellow lines have disappeared. I'm going to just point to that. The yellow ones have disappeared. His blood pressure is dropping and his saturation, just point to that please, is falling. That's the white number, 93, is falling. So obviously there's a problem that has happened during the intubation. So our doctors will try to work out what that problem is. And one of the issues that if we assume, for example, that this was a trauma patient, by auscultating, Dr. Mudley would have identified that there isn't much air entry into that side of the lung, meaning there might well be air in the pleural space, pneumothorax. And that's actually suggesting that the patient is what we call tensioning, meaning this pneumothorax is creating pressure within the thoracic cavity and is starting to have cardiovascular compromise from that.